Welcome to another morning chat. With everything going on in the world and the continuing rise of social media and technology, it's easy to struggle with your mental health. So, Dr. Lindsay from Miami is here. She's a clinical health psychologist, speaker. She hosted a TEDx talk, and she's the founder of Ocean Oriented. She's here to talk more in depth about some controversial psychological questions from me. So, welcome, Dr. Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I definitely geek out about the brain. My job revolves around helping people be smarter than their brain. So I'm here to just talk about the human experience.
Tell us a little bit about you and your background. What inspired you to become a psychologist and want to specialize in the human mind?
Yes. So I'm a clinical health psychologist, which is kind of emerged with medical issues. So it's kind of like a medical psychology area. And, thinking back, I was always mentoring students and kids. Whenever I was in high school, I was a part of the PAL program and working with populations that just needed, a little bit of extra help and volunteer work. And then I actually wanted to be a news reporter whenever I was in college. So that was my major for a little bit. And when I started to take psychology classes, then I realized how interesting I found the brain. And so then it started to click for me. The reason why I liked volunteering with people was because our brain shapes our entire experience of life, and things happen in our life that makes, somebody else maybe need a little bit more help. And the more we understand about the brain, then we understand everything, because our brain shapes our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations, our behavior.
Oh, absolutely. And you seem like an excellent speaker as well. So
Thank you.
it definitely goes
This is
hand in hand.
something, I've definitely, I see a lot of power in being able to take what the research shows works and what we know in science land and translate it in ways that's actually useful for people. And so as I went on my path and realized I switched over my major, and then realized I needed to go to graduate school and kind of focused on, doing the big route, which was getting my PhD and having more options that way. Worked really hard, and then started to specialize in trauma and PTSD, because there's so much movement that you can make with somebody who needs it very quickly. And so there's been, different things that I've specialized in over the years and gotten more training, and just followed my natural interest in the human brain and the rewarding nature of my work.
That's awesome. So you really followed your intuition. It's always best to follow what we're feeling. And
Yes.
awesome. So I saw you post an explanation about our dreams. Do our dreams mean anything?
This is a great question. So, yes, they do, and no, they don't. So it's always kind of a mix, right? So our brain
Right.
is just amazing. It's amazing because it's firing in all these ways kind of randomly, and it has an ability to synthesize information and make sense of it, right? So part of what our dreams are is just kind of random firings that then our brain is putting together and giving you some wacky pictures. So those kinds of things don't mean anything. So we can't read too much into them. But they do, the function of dreaming is so that our brain can practice skills and review experiences and consolidate them into memory and learning, and also kind of examine themes in our life and how we might, kind of learn more about those themes and just be better at life, right? It's also a way that our brain stays active while we're sleeping, because if our brain, all those cells really got really quiet, they would actually not function as well. So our brain has evolved to keep those cells active while we're sleeping in a way that really looks like we're awake. So when we're in REM stage sleep, rapid eye movement, and somebody's laying there and you can see their eyeballs moving back and forth, but they're not moving their body, that's rapid eye movement sleep. And it looks very similar on a brain scan as somebody who's awake. That's the way our brain kind of keeps things going to keep our brain healthy. Now,
Got it.
we can examine. So if we tend to be dreaming about something, or our dreams are always stressful, this does mean that we might be having a level of stress or anxiety or some kind of theme that we probably need to take a deeper look at. And then especially if we're having nightmares, this is usually kind of a piece of unresolved trauma that the brain is throwing at you and making you review over and over because it's trying to make sense of it. And that's when we need a little bit extra help.
So if it's similar situations or certain people that keep popping up, then that's something that actually means something. It isn't just something completely random.
Right, because we tend to dream about what we're experiencing on a daily basis. So if we're experiencing a lot of frustration with one person, then it's probably going to come out in our dream in different ways. And that is something that we want to examine.
Right. So the next step would be to maybe resolve that issue within, think about it, see maybe if you need to talk to that person and just take those next
Yeah.
steps.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. What does this mean? How can I maybe fix this to reduce my own stress level so that my brain isn't trying to work through it while I'm asleep?
Got it. So I've read and heard a lot about how our childhood years affect our development. And sometimes, often, maybe most of the time, it's more than we know. Can you give a few examples of trauma from our childhood or our past that can affect us now as adults?
This is an interesting one because I think now more than ever, we are aware of what is trauma,
Mhm.
and we're
Right.
putting words to experiences, yeah, that before people thought, oh, that's just life, but now we're understanding it on an emotional level. So,
Yes.
we have like capital T traumas, which we've kind of talked about more historically, which is like an accident, a death of a family member, being really sick for a period of time. Those are all things that are capital T traumas. But there are also lowercase t traumas that maybe don't fall as much in that category, but we're realizing are, very significant in themselves. So this can be, a parent who wasn't really there, or a parent who guilt tripped you a whole lot, or some minor bullying across school that you did not know what to do with internally, emotionally, and so it just kind of formed into a certain way that we think about ourselves, other people, in the world. And so this is kind of the entry point of that, of we've all been through different experiences in our life. A lot of those experiences were caused by our primary caregivers, who are just humans trying the best that they can, and nobody gives a training course on parenting. So
Right.
nobody actually learned to be a parent, right? It's wild when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
But everything that we experience in life basically teaches our brain about how to wire, and then how to think about ourselves, how to think about other people, and how to think about in the world. So, or the
Wow.
world in general. And especially with trauma, it disrupts, usually we think about this in 5 themes: safety, sense of safety; trust in ourselves and other people; esteem; intimacy. Oh my gosh, this was a quiz for myself. Safety, trust. Uh, I'm missing the middle one, and then it goes esteem and intimacy. I can't remember on the spot. It'll probably come to me later because that's how the brain
Yeah.
works. But there's these 5 themes that we really want to look at and say, okay, how has my sense of safety in the world been disrupted? A lot of times when I talk to people who are getting out of a relationship or who are depressed, and I suggest something, which I often suggest, which is traveling solo, there's often, especially for a female, a lot of fear around that. And when we
Oh, yeah.
dig deeper, a lot of times people have come from a household where parents were saying, if you do this, something really bad will happen. Or look at the news. We watch the news all the time, and oh, the horror.
Mhm.
So there's more of those like micro experiences that absolutely shape how we think about ourselves in the world, that we need to examine.
Absolutely. And I like how you mentioned about awareness because, I do think right now there are some downsides to social media, but I also think that right now, social media in a way is helping us become more aware with having people like yourself post things, and other psychologists. We're able to see and kind of learn more about this and see, that our feelings are validated, and to further explore that.
Absolutely. And I think, to add something to that, everybody has a responsibility of
Mm,
curating their Instagram and their feed, muting some accounts, unfollowing some, following more. Because when we look at Instagram, we should feel inspired and elevated, and like we're
yes.
growing, and not that we're more down, right?
Right. And that goes into the next question I want to ask you, which is, it can be hard to listen to yourself. We have all these distractions around us, social media, the news. So how do we, keep that peace and find mindfulness in a world that is just full of distractions?
Yes. So I think, yeah, to go back to curate your own feed, you have the responsibility to do that. Gary V is like an entrepreneurial leader, and he just talked about that, in this world with all of this noise, we have to
Mm,
try to take greater responsibility, right? So I think that's step number 1, is just understanding that we have the responsibility for that, and that we have to take action. And then, 2, we have to be aware of what is distracting and what is making us feel bad. And sometimes that's just chipping away slowly over time. So, if you follow things that are like body goals, that can initially be motivating. Okay, I need to go to the gym. And if you're able to embody that kind of habit or goal, then great. That can always be uplifting. But otherwise, things can get punishing. And a lot of those things that we see are just the ideal version of fill in the blank. And that can be very dangerous.
Right, because most of the time people aren't posting if they've had a bad day. Most of the time it's just a highlight of your life. So we're only seeing what we think is perfection when we really don't know the full picture.
Exactly. And, to your point with the question of, all of these distractions and this quick feed that we have. I mean, think about how quick those videos are now on TikTok and now Instagram stories, now YouTube shorts. 3 seconds, 7 seconds. And we're like, wow, 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 right? It's a quick hit of dopamine pathway stimulation, which is the same thing as other addictions of sugar addiction, salt addiction, sex addiction, fill in the blank. It's the same pathway. So we do need to be very careful and aware of that.
Right. And that's the next topic I want to touch base on. If we think that in today's society, social media can be seen as one of those addictions, as we discussed, there can be more negative effects than we realize, that we're constantly comparing ourselves to what we see online and what we think is perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, indeed, maybe it can be, like you just said, it's that oxytocin, that it's just that like addiction. You want to get that fix. You want to just scroll through and see.
Well, and especially with oxytocin, because it's very much a social bonding chemical, and we have the desire to be connected with people, that can be also a driver in staying connected. And in fact, there's all this research now about social media, and it's showing that mental health symptoms get worse with just 5 minutes spending on an Instagram. So it's like people rate their mood is worse. And we also know that our brain now views our phone as an extension of our bodies. That's why when you get up and you're like, oh, and you start to say, wait, where's my phone? Your nerve, it's like almost you can't stop thinking about it until you find it, right? Because we connect so deeply to the world and all of our friends and resources. I don't even know where to go unless I pull it up on my phone map. How did we live without it?
And that's interesting you say that, because I even think about myself. Like I can say, I feel like I'm in a bad habit now where when I wake up and when I go to sleep, it's like the last thing I do is look at my phone. And the first thing that I want to do is just grab my phone. So I feel like I've tried to get into this space where before I go to bed, I'm maybe journaling or trying to read. But honestly, it's a harder habit than you'd think to break. So do you have any advice for me or someone else who's trying to, maybe it's not social media or something else, that you're trying to change a habit? Or maybe we can specifically talk about that with social media, and then like advice for just other habits in general about how to break that, get out of that cycle. And it's just so crazy because you're right, like it is like it's like attached to us. It's like, how do we just recognize that, what, I need to put the phone down, like, let me have a second, let me not be so attached to it.
Yes. And so the hardest habits to break have 2 components. One, there's a lot of reward that comes with the habit, right? Even if it's bad for us, we get a lot of quick reward from it. And the second piece is that it's very socially accepted and doesn't really get in our way. So something like, we can metaphor this over to vaping. We have a huge problem with vaping in our society now. Why? Because you can do it on an airplane. You can do it in a classroom. You can do it in a car full of people and nobody cares because it doesn't smell like cigarette smoke. It used to be that smoking was the hardest habit to break because you can walk right outside at work and smoke and it's socially accepted. Something like heroin is definitely going to impact your life. You're going to hit rock bottom and you're going to say, I need to quit this, right? So that's easier to break than something like nicotine. And now that it's in vape form, there's a lot of quick reward and it's super socially accepted. The amount of people I see walking around having a conversation, vaping, it is one of the most dangerous substances that we have. Social media is very similar. Huge rewards, first and foremost. You open it up, you get immediate connection, you get immediate hit of like, wow, that video is beautiful. Wow, that photo is beautiful. Holy shit, that person's hot. right? Like all of
Yeah.
those things, quick reward, and it's very easy to do. In fact, a normal experience like standing in line, going to a coffee shop is a little bit of social anxiety, right? You're standing
Mhm.
there in the line, you feel awkward, you don't know anybody. Is that person staring at you? Probably. You're not sure why, right? So, at
Mhm.
the beginning of time, people have had a type of anxiety, a level of anxiety that they've had to tolerate in situations like this. When we have to tolerate anxiety, we usually figure out how to cope with it in healthier ways. We learn how to
Okay.
strike up conversations, make small talk, right? I'm stuck in this line. Let me see who's around me, right? That's healthy. But
Right.
now we have a phone. We have a quick escape. We have a way to go into our social media, and everybody else is doing it too, right? So think
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
the benefits of that habit and the acceptability of that habit, and we can do it literally anywhere. So when we examine the things that we're trying to break, we need to look at how much they have of those two components: quick hit of reward and social acceptability. I can do it anywhere. Those are the hardest ones to break. And honestly, probably one of the ones that are affecting our life the most. The second part of that was tips.
Yeah.
So with everything, awareness and a more complete understanding always lays the groundwork for understanding how to get out of something, right? Because we're not as
Mhm.
trapped or tripped by it. Step
Right.
number 2 is setting some really well-defined time limits. Have you heard of those apps now that will, as soon as you open Instagram, it actually opens the other app and it makes you do like a 20-second countdown and shows you how much time you've spent on Instagram in that week?
I think I've heard of them. I haven't tried it myself, but I have heard of it. Yes.
Yes,
So that's
I
an
highly
option.
recommend this. Yes, this aligns with what we call habit reversal training, which is an
Okay.
evidence-based intervention for breaking habits and starting new, healthier ones. And so, what we want to do is one, build awareness. So that's like, okay, I think this is a problem. I understand how tricky it is, and I'm not going to be tricked by it anymore. Let me download this app that will put in a buffer zone, because that's the second step: is how can I get a little bit more
Mhm.
distance from this thing where I can tolerate the negative feeling and I can start to have more control, right? So the app
Right.
will make you do breathing for 20 seconds. You can set the timer before I can access Instagram and I open it. This app is going to prevent me from doing that for 2 minutes. And I'm going to use those 2 minutes to pick up around my house, to do dishes, something, catch up on some other text messages. So you can build that in a way that you think will challenge you. And I highly recommend using an app like that. We also know that if we have a craving or an urge, this usually goes away within about 2 to 5 minutes. So even something like nicotine, if you have the urge to smoke the vape, but you decide to surf that urge like a wave, set your timer for 5 minutes and say, I'm not going to respond to this urge for at least 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, sure, I can do it, but I'm building in that buffer zone. That's a really good thing to do to start to break that cycle of urge, reward, urge, reward. We're building in more space and just building awareness through that as well.
And would you recommend to people, well, I would say to be patient with yourself because it definitely can be hard to, we say all these things, but then when you're actually in the midst of it, of doing the work, it can be easy to be quick to be frustrated with yourself. So I think, right, definitely while we're doing this, be patient and yeah, really understanding, like you said, is the first step.
Absolutely. Yes, because you know what's the thing that predicts relapse the most is
Hmm.
guilt. So when we
Hmm.
say, "Oh, I tried and I just can't," or whatever, if we get down on ourselves, that predicts negative outcomes always. So, even with something like cigarette smoking, we don't call it a relapse, we call it a lapse. And we expect lapses because this is hard. And so as we add in structure, it's like, we're going to have a week where we did not do the structure and we do not feel bad about that. We say, aha, I'm human. That's why one of my recent post just says a billion times, embrace your humanness, embrace your humanness, embrace your humanness. Because if we can really practice that, then when we mess up, we're not down on ourselves and we realign and recommit to values. And I would say that is one of the biggest things behind habit change is you have to understand your why. So we want to build
Hmm.
awareness. We want to create a structure that unhooks us from that fast response and starts to train our brain not to seek that dopamine as fast. That's very important with structure and kind of recommitment. But we also need a very strong, deep purpose around why we're doing the thing. So a deep purpose can be my own health outcomes. It can be my ability to feel that I have control over a habit that doesn't make me happy when I look back and I see another week of doing it, another month of doing it, another year, and I still haven't done it. That's a feeder into depression for the long term. So a really good values-based goal is I just want to be more in control of myself and not let something else be in the driver wheel. And that's going to make me feel better.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Thank you.
So do you think someone with depression can help their symptoms by making lifestyle changes, or is medication always necessary? With certain mental illnesses like depression, can we train our brains without medication?
Yes, 100% yes. Now,
Mhm.
always caveats, right? So this is why I love my job being a psychologist, because a psychologist does not prescribe medication. A psychiatrist prescribes medication, right? The path to being a psychologist is graduate school, a doctoral program, getting your PhD or PsyD, and then you're a psychologist working with behavior change, cognitive shifts, lifestyle stuff, existential stuff, lots of stuff there, right? This is more of the meat of what creates thriving in somebody's life. The path of psychiatry is extremely important. So they go to medical school, get their MD, and then they're able to prescribe medication. Now,
Right.
sometimes do need medication, but I think as a society, we are way over medicated for many things. And
I agree.
particularly something like mood and anxiety, those meds actually don't have a really great success rate. It's around like 50 to 70%, but like 70 is a really high end. Why would we do something that has such huge side effects when there's like a 50-50 chance, right? And sometimes it
Mm,
makes people worse. The other
mm,
piece about it is, and this is what I put on my post too, your nervous system is trying to tell you something. Instead of saying, I don't feel good, this must be me, I need to take a pill to fix it, we need to say, I don't feel good. There's something that does not serve me in my life. It might be a relationship, a job, a place that you live, a situation. You might be, meant to achieve or do more things than you are, and you're feeling very stifled and stagnant in that. And so we need to listen to that drive, kind of like you started out with your intuition, right?
Wow, that was well said. That was
Right.
really, yeah, I completely agree with that.
And if you think about what anxiety is, so like an
Mhm.
evolutionary basis of anxiety, it's meant to tell us when something isn't right, right? It's like, okay, if we're walking through the woods and we're like, la la la, and then we start hearing twigs breaking behind us, we're gonna have anxiety. And our brain says, hey, something's not right. You need to not feel comfortable right now. Stop singing and look behind you and feel scared. That will keep us alive, right? We don't really have to run from bears anymore. But what we do have to deal with is very complicated relationships that there's no manual or training book on. We have to deal with jobs that may not be the right fit, friends that aren't really fueling us in some ways. And we don't often have the words to set the boundaries, know what we need, ask for what we need, and create the world that best serves us, right? But we want to give weight to that anxiety, because when our nervous system, our being, whatever you want to call it, some people get spiritual with it, right? Whenever yourself says something is not right, that is some anxiety. And the first steps always should be examining, are your blood levels okay? Are your hormones okay? Go to your doctor, get a complete blood panel, rule out anything medical, because our body can tell us that, right? Step
Yep.
number 2 is do that same assessment, but in your world. Which domain of your world is not hitting home? Which domain is making you feel drained, burned out, hard to access joy? And what is your ultimate dream? And how far away are you from that, right? And these are action steps and changes that we can immediately make. There can also be a certain mindset that keeps us stuck and actually promotes things that happen in our world that make life tougher. That's cognitive therapy and really kind of examining that. And then, of course, sometimes there is a chemical imbalance of depression that is either very genetically loaded, that it's just like hair color or height, right? This thing expresses itself over time at some point. And so, that's something that we really might need a medication for, and it can work really well. there's also alternative treatments like ketamine infusions and psilocybin and those kind of substances are being approved now, just approved in Oregon. MDMA is being approved for therapeutic use. So we're seeing some new alternative options that have less side effects, we're thinking, and also better benefits.
Nice. This is so insightful. It's so insightful to hear all this. And wow.
I'm glad. Well, I think it's fascinating. And you know, our most important organ is our brain. Literally controls everything from our heartbeat to our breathing to our excitement level to our motivation every day, right? And so I think it's one of the most important things to be talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely. And can you tell us about your business, Ocean Oriented?
Yes, thank you for asking. So this has been a very cool journey, both professionally and personally for me in 2021 and 2022, actually a little bit before that as well. It's been a little bit of a trek. But I launched Ocean Oriented, which is the neuroscience of resiliency folded into ocean adventure, targeting kind of business owners and business leaders and teams and really anybody who wants to really work on themselves, also have fun doing it, but doing wellness that works, wellness travel that works, right? And so when I started Ocean Oriented, I really had the idea. I was already getting into spearfishing and freediving and realizing how important that was for me for balance. But the whole concept of freediving is wild. So freediving is where you hold your breath, one breath of air, and you dive down very deep. And what's cool about this is nobody thinks they can hold their breath, but we all have the mammalian dive reflex within us. So every single person has the mammalian dive reflex that's ready to be tapped. And what it does is it actually makes us very efficient underwater. It's super cool. And so it gets activated through the physics of water. So cold on our face, and then the pressure of the water as we go deeper on our lungs, that activates this biological response that everybody has ready to go, right? But the only way to trust it, excuse me, and really maximize it is psychology. It's 90% the mind to understand the science and then trust in the process, right?
Wow.
And
I've
so
always heard that too, with different things that you may take on. The first step of it is just believing, and just, it really starts with
everything. Even consistent exercise is 90% mental. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you have to create a plan, and you have to get yourself there. That's 90% mental, right? So, you know, I found it fascinating, especially because one of the most evidence-based treatments for anxiety and panic is what we call interoceptive exposures. So this is the behavioral branch of cognitive behavioral therapy. So many people have heard of that, CBT. It's like the gold standard research-based treatment approaches. It works for most things. So a behavioral approach is these interoceptive exposures where you make yourself uncomfortable on purpose. You actually bring up symptoms of panic and anxiety and experience them over and over so that your brain gets bored. That's basically what exposure therapy, behavioral therapy is. So then why panic sticks around and why anxiety sticks around is because the brain says, that was horrible. Oh God, I never want to experience that again. I'm going to do everything I can to avoid that. And oh my God, am I having a panic attack? I don't know. I need to escape. Or like, oh, I just need to rest. Like, let me get rid of this, right? So we actually develop a fear response to symptoms of anxiety, which makes everything worse. Now we have a snake eating its tail, a feedback loop, right? So what CBT does is it hacks that really tricky deep brain feedback loop. And when we make those symptoms happen on purpose and you do them over and over, it retrains the brain very quickly. One of the harder ones that we work up to is a 60-second breath hold. So since the beginning of my training, I've been working with people with anxiety to train them to get past 60 seconds just in session, right? Holding your breath. And it's very hard for people, but it actually solves panic symptoms. It's amazing. So then when I was learning freediving and seeing that the only way to trust your body is to get over that panic sensation and learn that it means nothing, I thought, holy smokes, there's a huge overlap here that has never really been kind of pulled together and delivered in a way that relates to mental health and emotional wellness and resiliency. So then I went on a whole mission. Okay, I'm going to become a freedive instructor. So that was wild, getting all the certifications. And then in 2022, I launched Ocean Oriented. And so basically what we do is I take a group out for 4 days in the Bahamas on a luxury catamaran. We have a Michelin star chef, and it's ocean to table. So we spearfish and bring in the fish that we're going to eat. We have the most amazing ocean adventures. We certify people in freediving, which is kind of like, I say it's like a petri dish or a rapid test to immediately understand how you respond to stress. The moment you start to hold your breath with your face in the water, you get a huge insight, and you can gain resiliency and skills very quickly based on that. People get certified in freediving if they're interested. And then I fold in the science, the neuroscience of resiliency into everything that we do.
Wow, that's amazing. And so you said your clients people have been seeing great results with this. It definitely is something that, wow.
Yeah. So I measure things in 2 ways. Yeah. So I give an evidence-based measure of resiliency before the trip, 1 week after, and 3 months after. So we can really, that is a way to talk about the deficits in their resiliency, and then to see how that changes after their experience with the trip. And the other way that I measure it is just simply through interview, right? And hearing what people say. And so at this point, it's been 7 months after the first expedition, and people are still raving about it, saying that it's completely shifted the way that they view themselves, the ocean. So, it's been really rewarding and just such a cool way to pull 2 seemingly unrelated things together to innovate and create something that can really help people discover more about their own brain.
Wow.
It's been fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds so incredible. Yeah, it definitely seems like it's definitely a way to take yourself out of like your own thoughts in a way and just.
Yes. Now I will say this has required me to tolerate a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress, right?
Yeah.
And I think you probably know too, because you've really put yourself out there on social media. And I think anybody who's tuning in, who's started their own business or, puts them out professionally on social media, or, I mean, my God, just moves through the world. And if you are going to create something new, it is scary. It is uncomfortable. Your brain will flare up and say, what are you doing? This is weird. Other people don't understand it. And in the beginning, you don't get a lot of feedback of like, oh, you're doing great. If you start a new business, you have to put money down before you get money back, right? And you don't know if it's going to work out. So I think, that is something for everybody to remember too, is that when we do some of the biggest things in life that are usually like the most rewarding, there's no certainty in that. And the terror or anxiety that we feel is actually what we're supposed to feel. And we're supposed to just say, okay, I feel this and I'm going to move forward with it.
Oh, that just made me think of another good question to ask you. So we say how there's good anxiety and bad anxiety. How do we know if something is for us or if it's just not right? Like, how do you know the difference between those two?
Yeah. So this is a wonderful question. And here's how I like to think about it. So really what we're talking about is like gut and intuition and authentic self versus anxiety, fear brain, and scarcity mindset. Okay. Anxiety, fear brain, and scarcity mindset will always keep us stuck and always keep our world small. So I like to think about these things as, here's how we tell the difference. So our authentic self, our gut, our intuition, our higher purpose is like a warm, heavy stone. We know exactly what it is. We can feel it. There's some comfort around that, right? We feel its weight and where it's trying to take us, right? On the other hand, anxiety is like, I still need to look this up, but those trees, it's like they have these weird spiky seed pods and they're like hollow. It's like a ball with spikes. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
I still don't know what tree this is. And every time I talk about it, it's been like years. I'm like, right, I need to Google that. But anyway, we all kind of know what that is. It's like you find them on the ground when you're a kid and you pick them up and they're like hollow. And if you grab them too hard, it hurts, right? That's how I think about anxiety, fear brain, and scarcity mindset is we're holding this thing in our hand. We're not sure like where to go with it. If we grab on too tight, it hurts us and it makes us feel really uncertain and confused, right? It gets tricky because a lot of times anxiety feels like a gut feeling, feels like intuition.
Yes.
Right?
It totally does.
But the problem is if something is not making us feel calmer in a sense of I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do, then it's
Mhm.
probably falling in this sense of anxiety. Because when we feel that feeling of like, I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do, yes, it's stressful. Yes, it's chaotic. I don't know all the answers, but I know I'm doing it for a higher mission. This is gut and intuition, right? Anxiety
Yes.
is always going to keep us like, well, I just don't know. I'm just not sure, right?
You
So
stay in
that's
that
what
loop. So what I'm
exactly.
hearing is you stay in a loop with the anxiety that something is not meant for you. It keeps resurfacing, but when something is for you, you kind of learn to get past those stages and you can see it through. You see that it's making sense in your life.
Exactly. And adaptive anxiety is something where the threat is very close, right? You're walking in a dark alley, leaving a bar to try to find your Uber, and there's
Mhm,
some shadow figure walking towards you, right? Yeah,
mhm,
be scared. That's gut and intuition saying, this is a dangerous space for me, and I don't trust that person, and this is weird, right? That will
mm,
always serve us well. That's healthy anxiety. That's part of our gut and intuition. When it comes to being in a job that you don't like and you have a passion and a dream to do something else, but you're scared about leaving that job because what if you don't find something, or what if you're not happy, or like whatever, that's the unhealthy anxiety that's keeping your mind and world really small. That's scarcity mind.
mhm,
I have to
mhm.
put up with something that I'm not happy with because I may not ever find something better. That keeps people stuck in abusive relationships. That keeps people stuck in relationships with somebody nice, but somebody who they aren't feeling, right?
Right,
That
right.
mindset keeps us stuck in so many things. And so we really want to understand the difference of that. And it's always hard to tell. There's been at points when I was creating
Mhm.
Ocean Oriented and hosting the first expedition, and I was, walking onto the boat for the first time, and the guests were arriving, and I'm like, I haven't heard from the cab driver. Is he going to pick them up? Right? That my stress level was high, but it was
Yeah.
all part of the process of creating
Well,
something new. So I had to
mhm,
relabel that as this is a normal thing to feel when you're creating something, right? And things might
mhm.
not go perfectly, but the catastrophe probably won't happen. The catastrophe of everybody, thinking I did something stupid, or, whatever, that's only this weird anxiety that keeps me small and scared, right?
Yeah, and I feel like this advice helps too for someone who might consider themselves an overthinker. If you're always over stressing about the little things, that definitely helps to just kind of keep yourself calm and just remember that sometimes, these things are normal, but they're thoughts, let them pass and
Yes, that's
just.
huge.
Mm. And if
Mhm.
anyone has any other questions for you or is interested in your services, how can they reach out to you? What's the
Yeah.
best way to
So
get
I
in
am
contact?
always taking new one-on-one clients if I have an opening. So this is where I work with somebody one-on-one and either do, therapy for symptoms that are getting in somebody's way and they're ready to address, or if somebody just wants to be a better performer in some ways and
Mm,
make sure their communication skills are on point. So that's kind of coaching versus therapy. And then I also hold Monday lives. So Instagram live every Monday at 6 Eastern, and it's a Ask Me Anything. So people can send me questions through the week. I post it on my story on Mondays. You can respond to that and send questions. I'm happy to answer anything that I can fit in on that Monday live. And somebody can always message me on Instagram or go to my website. And also, if anybody's interested in Ocean Oriented, I lead day experiences in Miami and then also expeditions to the Bahamas.
excellent. Awesome. Well, this was such a great chat. It was really nice meeting you, and hopefully we've helped everyone that's tuning in. If they have any other questions, they can reach out to you. And thank you so much.
Yes, and I'm always posting resources on my Instagram of how to connect to podcasts and everything. So definitely find resources out there, and we all have the responsibility to work on our brain. Thank you so much for having this conversation.